This is episode 59 with Erin Kameiko.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, episode 59 today, and I'm super excited to be speaking to a new friend of mine, Erin Kameiko. Now, Erin and I connected via Mark, who I interviewed in episode 47, but in case you haven't heard of her, she's a coach and consultant who helps people find and align with their unique values in order to create a more authentic life. Now, like so many of us, Erin started out following the safe route and found herself chasing life and career milestones that weren't really meaningful to her. It wasn't until she started living according to her values and releasing the fear of not being perfect that life really opened up. This new value-guided way of living led her on a journey of self-discovery that crumbled every part of the foundation she'd spent her life building, including her corporate career and a long-term relationship. Erin subsequently left that career, ended her relationship, and got a master's degree in psychology, which she now uses to guide others through self-discovery via her work at Project Revel. Now, in this episode, you're going to learn what to do when the things you thought you wanted no longer are, the side of big life changes that no one talks about, how to balance stability with a need for freedom, how to avoid the trap of social comparison, why self-improvement is useless without self-acceptance, and this is a big one, and how to identify and live according to your own core values. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/059, but for now, let's go hang out with Erin. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm super excited to be speaking to Erin Kameiko. Erin, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
Yeah, I'm excited to be speaking to you today. We connected through Mark, really cool dude who I interviewed. I can't even remember what episode number it is now. And then we've been interacting via Instagram and stuff, and it's always so much fun to watch your stories and see your little dog, which I'm sure everyone's going to go now and look at. But for people who haven't come across you before, why don't you tell us a bit about you and your quarter life story?
Sure. So let's see, my quarter life story, I guess, is still in progress, right? So TBD, I'll let you know how it goes at the end. But I am the founder of Project Revel, which is very much a product of sort of my own journey and my own learnings. And what I love about it is it's very authentic to sort of who I am. So much like my brand, when it comes to me and how I run my business, there's sort of no faking it. So I started off, I think how a lot of 20-somethings start off, and I was doing, what I thought I was supposed to do. And then through the process of sort of unlearning other people's definitions of what happiness and success and life needed to look like, I left my corporate career to pursue a master's degree in marital and family therapy in the field of psychology, which is something that I loved. And then once I finished my degree, I decided I wanted to branch off, start my own little gig. And now I've got Project Revel, which is a consulting firm where I help women sort of connect and align with their core values to bring purpose and fulfillment that's sometimes missing when we live according to the expectations of other people. And then through that, I do a lot of writing on the self-development topics that I feel like are helpful for people. I inject a lot of my own learnings and my own story into that. And, I'm still figuring it out, right, alongside everybody. And that's very much how I position my brand, it being sort of this universal struggle to find, where we're all supposed to be by replacing those learned definitions of what we have to do with what we want to do and what really sort of ignites us authentically.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the thing I love about you the most is that you're not afraid to put out there, like, I'm still figuring out my own life just as much as you are, and you don't hold that back. And it's kind of like the same reason I started this podcast is there were three reasons, but one of the biggest was like I wanted to learn these things myself. And I thought by creating a podcast, I could get in touch with people who would be able to help both me and people listening and going through the same thing. So that's really cool. And I know authenticity is a big one for you, and that's why we connected through Mark. But it kind of sounds like you had your whole life planned out.
Yeah, I did. I think like so many of us, I built this definition of what I thought happiness and fulfillment and success were. And it was based on definitions that weren't my own, right? So once you sort of start to live that story, if you really listen to your inner voice and your intuition, sometimes something feels off, right? And that definition is different for everyone, right? But I think it's this process of learning to listen well enough and trust yourself well enough to know, like, hey, this doesn't feel right. And to be able to have the courage to, course correct if that means leaving a relationship or finding a different career path. It's a tough thing and it takes a lot of courage, but that's ultimately what I strive to help people do. And so it's really important that I embody that by continuing to be brave and continuing to ask myself, what feels right for me right now, and not being scared to sort of go after that.
Yeah, and you did both those things, like change careers and left a long-term relationship, right?
I did. Yeah. And it's, I don't know, it's one of those things where, honestly, every day that I'm in sort of this new boat of building a new career and looking for love and all of those things that so many people my age are trying to do, I'm tempted every day, right, to sort of go back to, for me, what feels easy, which is to just like hop into a more stable career like I was sort of in before, and just sort of like I said in a recent blog post of mine, just grab the closest open seat, when it comes to relationships and path in general, for the sake of just, falling in line and being able to have sort of the predictability that comes with a more traditional path. But I think if there's one thing I've learned about myself, and I find this to be the case with a lot of clients that I work with, it's like the second we make decisions out of fear and we make decisions out of a belief that like, oh no, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be successful or I'm not going to be happy, it ultimately lands us in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. So it's, it's a daily struggle. And again, like that's so important for me to be transparent about, because, which is why, I really respect sort of how you've gone about it too, which is making it really about a collaborative learning process that we're all going through together. Because I think one thing that happens in the self-development space with like coaches or influencers is they're sort of positioning themselves as sort of having figured it all out, right? And I tend to believe that's crap, right? Mm-hmm. Because I always an ongoing process, no matter how far you've come. And the more we are, as leaders, are transparent about that, the more we give people that follow us an opportunity to feel less alone and to feel safe exploring and to feel safe saying, hey, I don't have it all figured out and I don't know what I'm doing and can you help me? It's like, absolutely, I'm helping myself. So mm-hmm. Jump on board.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of coaches do, like, I don't know, through their messaging or whatever on social media, like indirectly portray that image is maybe also a fear-based decision where they think like if they don't look like they've figured it all out, then people aren't going to work with them. But I think it's actually the opposite. Like if you're authentic and you show people that you're still on this journey, but you've done enough to be able to help other people, mm-hmm. I think that resonates more strongly.
Absolutely, 100%.
You mentioned, you thought you had your life planned out and then you didn't. How did you, and if people are listening to this, how can they deal with like that realization that the things you once wanted were no longer those things?
Right. Well, it can certainly be sort of scary and inconvenient to realize that the things that sort of once made you happy no longer do, or the things that maybe you thought you wanted you no longer do. And I think it's like anything when you come across those inconvenient realizations, the perhaps most intuitive thing to do is to ignore it, right? Because you're like, no, I'm sort of already set on this path. I've got this degree or I've got this title now and I've got this partner and sort of that's it for me. My advice for people is always to take like a 30,000 foot view of their life, right? And to really look ahead to the end, whenever that's going to be, and ask themselves, will I be mad that I lived for someone else, that I lived to keep other people happy, or that I lived because I was scared to try something else, and making those decisions over choosing to live according to what makes you truly happy, right? When you go to bed at night and when you wake up in the morning, like what a shame, right? And I think we only get really one opportunity. So when I take a 30,000 foot view of my journey and my legacy, that really helps me stay focused on the end result, as opposed to getting caught up in the daily minutia of like, well, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to make money? And how is it going to work? Like, I think it's so easy to get caught up in the how of things. But I think if you just stay married to that feeling that you want to have at the end of your life, which is one where you can look back and say like, man, I really, I put myself out there and the result was that I got to have it all, and live my truth and not have to fake it, then that's really going to be the thing that helps you push through that daily fear of the, oh my gosh, but how, and all those little details.
Yeah, I think that's why so many people do like stay in their comfort zone, and like whether that's a corporate job or a relationship or anything else, is because they actually do know what they want, or they have some idea and they know that it's not the thing they're doing, but it's like, well, I don't know how to do, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
And so they don't even try. And the thing that I was going to say that I forgot, I remembered now. And it was like, I also still have times where I've even said this to my girlfriend, like, I wonder if I should just like get a normal job and try and build this on the side at the same time. And then she's like, don't be ridiculous.
I know. It's so tempting though, right? Because like fear is so real. And I have, I never judge anybody who chooses not to sort of take the risk, because it is really scary. And to exist in this constant state of uncertainty and not knowing when or how things are going to unfold, like that's very, very freaky, especially for humans who are wired to crave, predictability and patterns, and they crave the ability to look ahead and say, okay, I know when the next paycheck's coming, or I know when the next big break is coming. And so I get it, and that's why like I'm so open and transparent about the fact that like fear is real. It's there. It doesn't mean we can't still do and go. It just means we have to learn to set it aside long enough to want more for ourselves in our career, in our relationships, or whatever it may be.
I love that. So I had a comment from one of my listeners / readers, and he said like the content that I've been creating is great, and like he loves the inspiring stories from guests. But he said that there's sometimes occasions with me and other sort of bigger podcasters where you don't hear the dark side, or like the nitty gritty, the things people went through. You just hear that, I quit my job and now I'm doing something that I feel more passionate about. So what were some of the challenges, or like your first steps that you went through?
Right. Well, I mean, what challenges have I not gone through when it comes to trying to get my vision up and running, right? I think I remember like having the idea for Project Revel and just being riddled with anxiety, the day that my site was finally done and I was ready to hit publish, and make that first post announcing to people, what I was up to. And I remember just being scared shitless, and being like, this is really new and it's really unfamiliar, and I'm terrified what people will think, and I'm terrified, whether or not in 6 months people will have forgotten, right? I mean, there's so many things that you tell yourself in those moments, and that fear still comes up on a very regular basis, and I'm almost, I guess I'm like almost a year into this, right? And there are times when I am ready to just jump ship so hard and like land in my previous career. And the fear can manifest itself in a lot of really ugly ways, where I get really competitive with people, or I'm I'm like obsessive about how much money I am or am not bringing in. I mean, there's all of these ways that the fear manifests itself. And I think one of the ugliest ways for me is I kind of shut down and I stay stagnant, right? So I'm not really putting content out. I'm scared to write. I'm scared to pursue new clients. Yeah, it looks like all of those things. And there's not a lot that's glamorous about this phase of starting a business, right? So, I've recently moved back in with my mom to transition into my next place, and being, 29 and having to say like, yeah, I have this business that I started and I'm living with my mom right now. I mean, that's not sexy, right? But all that I can really do in these moments where I'm judging myself really hard for where I'm at and the timing of my path is to remind myself that this is a part of my story, that this is the part of my story that I can share with someone like your reader, right? Or your listener, to let them know that nobody just stumbles into success. And if you do, great, and teach me how. But for me, it's it's fear. Sometimes I struggle with low mood, and I have a hard time staying motivated and believing in myself and what I'm doing. And it's just it's not easy. It's not easy on any front, but it's always worth it.
Yeah, I think so there's 2 points I want to bring up there. Let me go with this one. I think the biggest thing for me is like one of my biggest values, and I want to get to values later on, but one of my biggest values is like consistency or certainty or that kind of thing. And like going the route that you and I have gone, that's not really popping up around the corner every minute.
No.
So for me, a big thing is like, how do I balance the freedom that I'm kind of working towards with the stability of like, knowing that I'm going to be able to pay my bills and save a bit each month.
Right.
Have you experienced that yourself?
Yeah, I have. And I think, finding that balance is tough because you don't want to crave so much certainty that again, you start making concessions and like making other commitments that are then putting this beautiful vision that you're building, too far to the wayside. And yet, you want that certainty because again, like we're wired as humans to want that. I think for me, I've just found ways to create certainty, and just have it look different. So while I may not have certainty around, income or even vision, I feel like I'm throwing a million darts at the wall, just like seeing which ones hit, right? I think I create certainty in my structure, my routine, and my relationships, whatever way possible. So that means like staying consistent with writing, staying consistent with connecting with people who inspire me, just creating predictability in other ways, right? Because I can't have it in the realm of career right now. And that's something I sort of accepted, at least in the interim, and just kind of trying to find it other places. Like there are other ways to feel grounded. There are other ways to feel secure, and they may just not be tied to the professional metric at this moment. So my hope is that you can also find that, in whatever way you can.
Yeah, I love that. I've never thought about it that way before. And I am like, my girlfriend jokes that I'm like part robot because I'm really disciplined with like daily routines and structure and stuff. But yeah, just to recap for like people listening, if you value something like certainty, like it doesn't mean that everything has to be certain or predictable, but look for it in other ways. That was really cool. Thanks. The other point I wanted to mention while you were explaining, like, starting your business and moving back in with your mom and still being unsure of a lot of things, is to what degree is social comparison a factor there, and like seeing everyone else around us, like getting married or buying a new house or things like that.
Oh man, it's such a huge piece of the pie. I feel like which is why something like social media, I think, can, while it's got so many benefits, it also can be so detrimental because it just gives us another medium through which we can compare ourselves to what other people are doing. I think for me, I've got an amazing group of friends, and a lot of them are settling down and getting engaged and yeah, making those big purchases and advancing in their careers. And it's so hard to not get caught up in that comparison game or feel like I'm so behind that I might as well just give up, right? But I always like to say, don't compare your inside or how you feel to someone else's outside, right? So I think people can often hit these milestones that are very societally encouraged, right? Like a certain earning potential or marriage or a certain title at work, a manager, director, whatever it may be. But that's again, it comes back to the metrics by which we measure things. That's just one way to measure success along a path or a journey, right? And I know for me, I look at how I feel and I feel really fulfilled. I get to help people every day. I get to write. And while my bank account may not look like it did when I was in my corporate job, and it may not look like the people around me, or my relationship may not be in existence, I guess, in my case, if my metric is wanting to feel fulfilled and wanting to feel like I'm making a difference, then I'm super wealthy and I'm super far ahead and far along, right? So I think it's really just learning to, until we get to these societally prescribed metrics, to just learn to measure things in another way, and to also remember that we can never know how someone else's life feels, right? So again, it's like comparing our lot to someone else's based only on the way things look. And you and I both tomorrow, again, to our point, could hop back on that corporate route and get married and have the kids and like do all the things that traditionally we're supposed to be doing, according to whomever. And it may not feel right. And all of a sudden that would be the metric for us. And we may or may not be super unfulfilled and unhappy. Not to say that path leads to unhappiness, but when it comes to individual values and what's important to us, for me, I know that right now the traditional path doesn't align with my core values, right? And so for me to jump on that path would lead me to a different kind of discomfort, one that may be more so than the kind that comes with feeling behind when we compare ourselves to other people.
Yeah, and like the people you're comparing, and I don't mean you now as in you specifically, but like the people that someone might be comparing themselves to could be on the verge of what you and I did. Is like they're not fulfilled, but on the outside it looks like, oh, they've got it so good, and then tomorrow they might quit and be in the same boat or even further behind where we are now. So it's funny how it all works.
And that's totally something that I find a lot of my clients struggle with, right? Like from the outside, they did everything they were supposed to do. And so they've got the high paying career and they've got the marriage and the kids and whatever. And they come to me because they're like, this doesn't feel how I thought it would. Right. And so it becomes this process of really uncovering what are my core values and how do I live according to those, and not necessarily meaning like abandoning your family or taking a career leap, but there are other ways to unearth those in your life behaviorally on the day to day that increases how fulfilled you feel and how purposeful you feel, right?
Yeah, we've mentioned values quite a lot now, but just before I get to that, Revel Wellness, on the site you talk about a different definition of wellness, which I kind of thought about now when you were speaking about being wealthy. And I was having a really cool discussion with some of my friends a couple of weeks ago about, like, we were talking about, is there an absolute definition of wealthy? And I said, like, I don't think so. I think being wealthy is a state of mind, and I feel incredibly wealthy right now myself.
Right.
But I was interested to see, like, you've got a different definition of wellness than people think. What is that that you use in Revel?
Well, I think when it comes to the online space, right? Like if you do a search of the term wellness, you're typically going to find a lot of things related to physical wellness, nutrition and exercising. And I think while that's certainly a piece of the wellness pot, I think what we have always de-emphasized just societally has been emotional wellness, right? And mental wellness, and knowing that they're so inextricably linked, right? So this idea that we can be taking care of our bodies and not ever taking a look at what's going on inside, to me, that's such an incomplete definition of what it means to be well, right? Or healthy, or happy, or good, right? So I wanted to kind of challenge this idea and say, like, we can actually start from the inside, right? And when we look inside, we realize that outside, that's when the the wellness sort of connects and aligns. So for me, for example, there was a period in my life when I was really unhappy. I felt really bad about myself. And this was when I was sort of in the corporate gig. And I actually was, over exercising. I wasn't eating in a way that was like really fueling my body. I was really thin, and maybe from the outside, I looked like I was really well, but I wasn't. Right. So it's so ironic that like I can sort of fit this metric from the outside, but because my drive to like exercise and eat well was founded in a lack of self-esteem, to me, it was like the opposite of wellness, right? So I kind of wanted to flip that idea and say, like, what if we really took a look at what was going on inside? Now, as somebody who I feel like is fairly balanced and maintains pretty decent emotional health, I'd say for the most part, I still take care of my body. I still eat well. I still exercise, but it's coming from a place of like, I love myself enough to treat my body well. I love myself enough to want to feel well. And it's not this, if I don't work out, I'm not going to be pretty and therefore worthy and therefore deserving of love. So it's kind of just a different definition of wellness, one that really puts an emphasis on how well are you on the inside. And to me, the definition really relates to how much are you connected and aligned with what's important to you.
Yeah, that's amazing, because like one of the things I explored after I quit my corporate job was personal training. And like being in the middle of that, you see people who like on the outside, they look amazing.
Right.
But they're just going about it in a really unhealthy way. And it's like something that I'm really passionate about lately is the whole like balance between self-love and self-improvement. Like there's this huge drive for self-improvement and like development and self-help and personal growth.
Right.
But unless it comes from like a place of self-love and you think you're doing it because, I need to study more and like grow more because I'm not good enough right now. I think that's just going to kind of push that destination further, and you're never kind of going to get there.
100%. I actually love that you said that, because I was literally just thinking the other night that we should rename the self-development industry the self-acceptance industry, right? Because I think we get, even in the self-help, self-development, however you want to label it, right? We get obsessed with like having to get somewhere before we can be successful, or having to be something before we can get happy. And I think the implication is we have to get or be somewhere or something other than we are right now. And that I think everything needs to be founded in like, I accept myself just as I am, with my flaws and my intricacies and my complexities. I'm okay right now just as I am, and I'm innately deserving and worthy. And I think if you don't start from that place, to your point, you're always going to be striving out of a fear that if you're not earning something, or you don't have this cool new trendy self-help habit, that you're not successful or worthy. And I think that can really lead you down the wrong road.
Yeah. And then the other end of it is like my mentor, Jacob Sokol, he shot a video last week where he said like, the other part of this is, if that's your mindset, like I constantly need to get better, you're going to ignore the growth that you've already done to this point. And the example he used was like, if you look in the mirror every single morning, you think like, well, my hair's not growing. Like, why is my hair not growing? Because compared to the day before, it might look exactly the same. But if you take a look at your hair, like, if you never cut your hair and let it grow for a year, and then you look back like, wow, I've come a long way, which is a really silly example, but it's, it kind of
perfect
speaks to that example of, if you're always looking ahead and like trying to get better, you're going to miss the the growth that you've already done, and B, the fact that like maybe you don't need to grow, like you're already okay how you are now.
100%. Yeah, maybe it's totally fine exactly where you are, and it's totally fine to be exactly what you are. But yeah, I think that's where the self-development industry can get tricky sometimes, because there is a lot of this, when you get here, you'll feel happy and successful. And if there's one thing I've learned about like milestones and goals, sometimes, or I tend to truly believe that they only feel as good as the journey. So you can't like hate your way to liking yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you really have to start with, if I'm whole and okay now, then externally it doesn't really matter what's going on around me. And any success that I experience will just be a cherry on top, because I already believe that I'm worthy and accepting just as I am.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Love yourself.
Love you.
Erin, I don't want to end this conversation before we touch on values. I know it's something that you incorporate in your work with clients.
Yeah.
So for people listening, and it's also something that I believe is really important, and something that I do with clients, but for people listening, like how can they start to identify what their core values are?
Sure. I think values are sort of this abstract concept, and unless we really apply it to ourselves and ask ourselves, you know, when has there been a time in my life, maybe it's now, or maybe I'm disconnected from this entirely, when I felt really motivated, when I felt really curious, when I had a lot of energy, right? And what was going on in my life when I felt that way? And so to really use your history as an indicator of when you were living according to your values, if you're not currently doing it, right? So if you feel unmotivated, unfulfilled, like you lack energy, whether it's in your job or in your relationship, it might speak to, right, a misalignment in the things that are truly important to you and how you're living. Right. So in my work with people, we figure out, you know, if it's not now, then when was it? And what was going on? Because what I know, and I learned this actually when I was working in the capacity as a marital and family therapist, that no matter what people came in with, whether it was like a diagnosis or a relationship issue or some other ongoing mental disorder, that the common thread was that if you weren't living according to those innate values, and they're different for everyone, right? Which is why I never like to blanket people with like, this is what you do to be happy, because I believe that it really is as unique as individual fingerprints. That if you're not living according to whatever those fingerprints are for you and your value system, you will feel purposeless and you will feel unfulfilled. And so it's really just about reflecting, whether it's through like journaling or through having an insightful conversation or hiring a coach or whatever it may be, to have somebody just hit the pause button on like the do mode, stop and look inward and say like, what truly ignites me? And if I'm not living that now, how do I go about doing that? What's the first step?
I love it. I love it. Erin,
Yeah.
I do want to be mindful of the time here. Anything else we haven't mentioned that you think might be valuable for people listening?
Let's see. Well, I've got a few notes here.
Yeah,
Let me see which I actually haven't looked at this entire time.
Well, that's the best conversation.
It is. Well, you make it very easy. You're a great interviewer.
I'm glad we're on audio. You can't see me blushing.
Let's see. I think one thing that we didn't talk about is the role that self-love really plays in being able to live according to your values. Because I think unless you value yourself enough to insert yourself into the equation of what do I want, you're only going to be taking other people's input, right? So it's like if mom has an expectation of you, or if husband has an expectation of you, you're going to be living according to those as long as you can't love yourself enough to say, no, but my happiness matters and what I want actually matters. And that's why you'll see so many people striving for the external validation because they can't provide it on their own. Right. And so that's why I think like self-esteem work and developing a sense of self is really a crucial ingredient in living according to your value system, because you have to like yourself enough to want to be happy. You have to like yourself enough to say, I deserve to feel, a sense of fulfillment and purpose in my day-to-day life. So I think it's sort of like you can't have one without the other. So I think whatever that process looks like for you in terms of learning to just move closer to that place of, I genuinely am happy with who I am, the closer you'll come to being able to find that sense of purpose and fulfillment in your life.
I'm so glad I asked you that question. That's cool. I feel like we could talk for way longer. And you have a great article that I wanted to mention, but I'll hook it up in the show notes on the 5 steps to overcoming career disillusionment. But I'll link that up in the show notes. I do have some final questions before we wrap up here, Erin. The first one is, what do you wish you'd been told? Well, you're on the edge of your 30s. Oh, your 20s. Sorry. What do you wish you'd been told earlier in your 20s?
I wish somebody had told me that staying safe and comfortable doesn't feel better than going for it. And we tell ourselves that it does because we're, again, as humans, wired to anticipate everything that can go wrong and all of the things that can be scary. And we therefore are often choosing staying safe and comfortable over going for it. And I wish that somebody had said, safe and comfortable only feels good for so long, right? And I'm glad that I made the shift here in my late 20s toward closer to what is going to feel incredible for me at the end of my life. But if I had known that staying safe and comfortable is not all it's cracked up to be, I think I maybe would have made that shift a little sooner.
What is the greatest opportunity for quarter lifers today?
Greatest opportunity? Oh man, I mean, I think the fact that we are living in such a digital age, when that tool is used responsibly and correctly, I think that it's such a neat opportunity to be able to connect with people from all over, right? And to make what used to be so divided into this really awesome universal community where people are talking about things they struggle with and making the unknown known and bringing that dark side, right, that your listener felt like we didn't hear enough of into the light and saying, hey, I'm struggling too. I mean, I've gotten emails from people in different countries, on the regular saying like, wow, something you said in this podcast interview or something you wrote about in this blog, like really helped me make an important shift. And that's somebody I never would have had access to, right, before. And so it just gives us an opportunity to spread our message, our important message, whatever that may be, that much wider and make that much bigger of an impact.
Yeah, I love it. And it's so funny how most of my guests have said some version of that too. Erin,
no, you, my friend, right?
Totally. Erin, before we wrap up here, where can people go to find out more about you and Revel and your cute little dog and all that good stuff?
Oh, well, she is a little doll, isn't she? She's actually got her own Instagram, but for the purpose of this, I'll just go ahead and provide you with mine. So my website is projectrevel.com, Revel. And you can find me on Instagram at Erin Kameiko, Kam as in Mike, Eiko. And I look forward to connecting with anybody who reaches out. And thanks so much for having me, Brian. This was really fun.
Yeah, I'm so glad we got to do this finally.
I mean, it's the most fun I've had at 8 a.m, that's for sure.
I don't know if I believe that or not, but we'll go with it. Erin, before I ask the final question, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you for coming on today. But more than that, just taking the step when you felt unfulfilled and unsatisfied in your own career and life, and making big decisions like ending your relationship and starting a new business, and now helping other women do the same thing and finding their values and live according to those values. I think it's really cool work that you've got going on, and just on the fun side, like showing up so authentically and just sharing you in your entirety. I really love it. And the final thing I do want to ask is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say do one thing that you'll be bad at and one thing that makes you uncomfortable this week, because I think that moves you closer to vulnerability closer to authenticity. And those are the things that are going to serve you in your quarter life comeback. Just being less concerned with how life looks and how you look to other people, and more concerned with just your growth and stretching and taking risks.
I like that. Erin Kameiko, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thank you for having me, Brian. You're the best.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up episode 59 of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast. And a big thanks to my girl, Erin Kameiko, for coming on the show today and just sharing a bit about her story. And I really enjoyed this one. It's a little bit more sort of behind the scenes and looking into what really goes on when we make some of these big life changes. If you like this one, please share it around with your friends on social media and shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier to let me know your biggest takeaway. For me, it was what we discussed about self-improvement can only go so far unless it's built on the grounds or the foundation of self-acceptance. You know, if we don't have that self-love and that self-acceptance, then any self-improvement we're going to do is going to be coming from a place of, I'm not good enough already or yet. And what we want to do is be okay with the person we are right now and look at self-improvement as a way to just get even better, but not to replace feeling like we're not enough right now. If you like this one and you want to get more like it, go to quarterlifecomeback.com and subscribe. And you can catch the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/059. Thanks once again for joining me this week. And until next time, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.